Ashley, add to what we just heard there from Mr. Kapadia, especially in light of the fact that there seems to be a very concerted attempt by the government from, from the level of the Prime Minister to encourage the startup ecosystem. Just a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister again addressing Indian startups. Do you believe that this budget could perhaps take that agenda forward? And what more would the expectation and the ask be on the tax front?
Sure. Thanks, Jane. So you're absolutely right. I think the government is focused on and has realized the importance of startups that they've contributed to this country. Right? Today, India has 80 unicorns, of which 40 were developed in 2021 itself. India was actually the third largest creators of unicorns in 2021. And that's no mean feat, right? A lot of this has come in through the capital that has been invested by investors. So private equity investors, again, reached an all-time high of 60 plus billion in 2021. What this does is, with startups, there's a lot more job creation, there's a lot more taxes, there's a lot more exports that are encouraged and better technology. So as a country, we need an ecosystem that keeps encouraging these startups. And for that, you need to have an environment that's conducive for people to invest in these startups. Now, all of these startups are young, unlisted companies. And today, there is a lack of parity from a long-term capital gains tax perspective, as Sudhir touched upon, right? So on the listed side, tax on long-term capital gains is about 11.5%. But unlisted investments are taxed at 28%. And this is despite the fact that these are much more riskier investments. These are investments going into younger companies, which is the real need of the country. And so our ask has been that, why is there a 2.5 times delta between listed as well as unlisted? There should be a level playing field. Some of these complexities that are there, as Sudhir touched upon, even in terms of the tenure to determine long-term capital gains between listed and unlisted, there needs to be parity both in tax rates as well as in the way it's thought about. And, we prefer a simpler tax regime to that extent.
Yes, a simpler tax regime is certainly the ask. But Mr. Garg, let me come back to you and to the point that Sudhir Kapadia made as well. I think there is a sense within India Inc. that, look, let this be a budget that focuses on implementation of the promises already made, on the announcements already made. In that context, of course, privatization, strategic disinvestment, we have all of those policies now out there, and the hope is that the government will press ahead on each one of those. But outside of what happens on that front, at this point, the need of the hour seems to be to boost consumption. At least that is the consensus as far as industry is concerned. What could the government do to enable that, to ensure that to happen?
See, the budget is about announcement. Budget is not about implementation. You do the implementation during the course of the year. And that is where I was saying, if you look at the track record of what we have done after 1st of February 2021, on the privatization front, on disinvestment of many announcements which had been made, or for that matter, even taking power sector reforms and many other reforms forward, that period of implementation, the action does not seem to inspire that confidence that agenda or reform is very seriously on the table. That's the reason I think in this budget, the government may make the sort of same commitments again. There is no harm in making that. But the credibility of those announcements and reaffirmations might not actually be that serious. That's what my intention was when I said that the reforms might see sort of falling off the table. Coming back to your question about the consumption, that, as the data now tells you very clearly for the last 2 years, one segment which has suffered the most is the consumption, the private consumption. Even in the second quarter of 21-22, the private consumption is lesser than the private consumption of 2 years before or in the same quarter. The 6 monthly consumption is lower. So consumption is a serious thing, and it's reflected everywhere. You see many surveys which about the consumer confidence and their expectations about income, and also that I think is a very serious issue which the government needs to address badly. We have addressed it by providing this free rations, etc., but not much has been done in the form of providing income support to people for sort of keeping up their consumption besides the food part. So that is what I think the government need to do it. There are no policy proposals on the agenda which are sort of discussed in the public forum, that what exactly the government can do to make more to give push to the consumption. And now we are also seeing the inflation surging. We have wholesale inflation, which is exceeded 12 to 13% for last couple of months. And this is likely to spill over on the retail side in times to come. So seriously, the consumption issue would have to be addressed in the budget. How do you do it? Can you do it by way of designing a better income or direct income transfer schemes for taking care of the indigent, the poor, or you can provide better prices for what they produce. The farm prices, even if you look at that, the prices of farm produce actually in all the markets are lower than what the minimum support prices are, which that then hurts the consumption of farmers. So how do you actually give them those prices? How do you provide income support for the people who have lost jobs and who are earning less? I think would be the big challenge going forward.
It will be a big challenge, and at least previously an income support scheme is not something that has found favor with the government. So unlikely that it is going to be taken forward this time around. We don't know, but as I pointed out, it was the expectation last year as well, but didn't come through. Mr. Shah, let me address the issue as far as investment is concerned. Last year, we saw the government announce 13 sectoral PLI schemes. You also, of course, have the move towards the RODTEP regime. What would your expectation be? Do you think that more schemes are likely to be announced? And even as far as the RODTEP rates are concerned, as well as inclusions within the RODTEP regime, what would your expectation be?
I think the expectation is that PLI scheme scope will increase further. There are 13 sectors covered as of now, and the belief is that it will increase further. Theoretically, the scheme is an outstanding scheme. A lot, of course, will depend upon how it pans out and how it gets implemented and how the industry itself exploits the benefits which the scheme promises. RODTEP, of course, has been a bit of a disappointment as far as the rates are concerned from the industry's perspective. There have been some sectors which have been kept out. The rationale for that was not exactly very clear. It was suggested that those sectors are doing well and hence don't deserve support, which I don't think is very appropriate. Because I should not be punished because I'm doing well. So I think the RODTEP scheme will be expanded. I'm aware of the fact that the committee has met several times recently to also look at increase of the rates because some sectors again had expressed disappointment. And talking of export promotion, export linked schemes, you also have some scheme which has announced 2 budgets back, known as NIRVIC, which is a sort of a scheme meant to provide insurance cover for exporters that has still not seen the light of the day. I think we need to look at that scheme too, and if possible, ensure it gets implemented.
Well, gentlemen, as Mr. Garg pointed out, the budget is not closed yet, so perhaps there is a window of opportunity. And if the Finance Ministry and the team from North Block is listening in on this program, then they have plenty of very specific, pragmatic ideas that have been put on the table. We will know on the 1st of February how much of this is actually going to translate into reality. Subhash, Garg, Najib, Shah, Sudhir, Kapadia, and Ashley Menezes, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on Eye on India as we count down to Budget 2022. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute.